Hi! This sub-series about bosses and their related items will include 3 videos where we'll take into account as much context as possible to learn something new or interpret things we already know in a different way. What does this boss drop upon death and why? What are the techniques they use in battle? Is it relevant to who they are and what their place in the story is? If I don't mention an item that is seemingly connected to the boss, it means it's better suited for another thematic video. For example, Lady Butterfly drops Sekiro Droplet, but I think it will be more fitting to include this item into the future Takeru and Tomoe video. It's quite tricky to choose what goes into a thematic video or doesn't, and undoubtedly it's rather subjective, but I'm doing my best. We'll take a look at every single item and character anyway, so don't worry. In the previous video we discussed Sugar, Spirit Falls, and the Headless. Feel free to check it out, I will leave a link in the description box below. As usual, we'll quickly go over the disclaimers, legend, and sources. Number 1. Please do not assume that I have access to some secret true knowledge. I am just entertained by reading Sekiro in Japanese. My lore theories are just theories, so treat them accordingly. Number 2. I am not a professional translator, I have never worked in localization. Yes, I will say that something is translated poorly and something is not, and it will be my personal point of view. Ultimately, my goal is to give you the information so you can see if the localization was good or not, whether something important was lost or not. My opinion is just that, and I choose to share it. Number 3. I am not an expert on Buddhism, so if I get something wrong in the religious side of things, I'm sorry. I will leave links to the Buddhist terms that we will encounter, so you can read more on your own if you're interested. As usual, the transcriptions I give do not follow all academic rules, and I don't think it's necessary. They're just here to represent the pronunciation in case you're curious. All sources I used for this research will be listed in the description box below, along with all the additional information that I referenced throughout the video, so you can read more if you're interested. There you will also find a link to my original blog post if you want to read it through. As with Sugars and Spirit Falls, the basic description of all memories and remnants is exactly the same, so we'll discuss it just once. Once you've killed a boss, you receive an item called Tatakai no Kyoku, literally battle memory. I'm not sure why the English localization chose to translate it just as memory, but I'm sure there was a reason. Extraordinary Foe is great, it accurately corresponds to the word used in the original. Taguimare means unique, exceptional. Then there is always an identifying line that tells us who this boss was. When you use a memory, you receive something called Tatakai no Zanshi, literally battle remnant. The English localization chose yet again to drop the battle part, so we have just remnant. Although distant is a rather loose interpretation of the original, literally now nothing except for this remnant remains. When it comes to what these remnants mean for Wolf, they become his kate. This word denotes mental or spiritual nourishment, sustenance, or source of encouragement. We will be looking at remnants rather than memories, as they contain much more information about the bosses. We'll start with Gyoubu.
My name is Gyoubu Masataka Oniwa!
While you're making your way towards Gyoubu, you overhear soldiers talking about him, and they call him Gyoubu the Demon. This nickname is constructed by throwing out one kanji from Oniwa Gyoubu to get Oni Gyoubu. Oni means demon, so here you have it. In the Japanese version, he is called Gyoubu the Demon when you fight him, and both his memory and his remnant are titled exactly that. For some reason, the English localization chose to name him Gyoubu Oniwa, which is honestly very boring and makes all those overheard conversations lead up to nothing. Also, his memory is called Gyoubu Oniwa and his remnant just Gyoubu. Thank God we don't have a third derivative item. With this word swallowing, there'd be nothing left to name it. The original is much more cohesive, and he's named Gyoubu the Demon everywhere. Infamous Group of Bandits is quite accurate. The original says, bandit whose name roared across Ashina. When describing Isshin's attitude, the localization says captivated, which is close enough, but not as sweet as the original Horekomo, to be charmed by something. The original also says that Isshin took in not only Gyoubu, but all his bandits as well. Then Gyoubu became Genichiro Ashina's most trusted retainer, which is also close enough, but not quite. The original says that he became Moriyaku, a person responsible for someone else's upbringing and education. I read a bunch of Japanese forums and learned that in the Sengoku period, when Sekiro takes place, a chieftain would pick his most loyal vassal and appoint him a caretaker of his firstborn son. Here, Isshin made Gyoubu a trusted caretaker of Genichiro, who at the time must have been a little boy. Gyoubu's main associated item is his spear that you can make into a prosthetic tool. If by looking at the picture you're not sure what the weird smoking pipe is, it's that horn that can pull armor. Gyoubu's helmet has a broken horn, quite possibly as a reminder of his signature spear that was broken during the rebellion. Unfortunately, I couldn't find an image of this spear when it was in one piece in the art book. Maybe it had two horns, because the original keeps saying one horn as if implying that there was one more. This would probably explain why Gyoubu was given cross-shaped Tamura's spear afterwards. His own spear had two horns, and thus was in some way cross-shaped too. But I'm not sure of anything, just would like to see his spear before it broke. The English localization says that the horn contracts to pull enemies in, when the original says that only the blade contracts and the horn just hooks on the armor, but these are all minor things. When it comes to the Isshin's comment about the spear, the original is kind of hard to decipher. Here's what he said after the spear broke. He was expressing admiration for how exactly the spear broke, maybe celebrating its noble death. That's something you would expect to find in Japanese texts. A wording is a little disappointing. The verb kashisuru describes a person of a very high social standing giving something to someone of a low social standing. The verb to bestow would have been nice to see here. The whole construction is wrapped into toyu structure, meaning as said. They say that Isshin admired the way the spear broke so much that he bestowed upon Gyoubu the cross-shaped spear of General Tamura. One more item that gives us some details about Gyoubu is the Gatehouse Key that opens the room where the broken horn is kept. In the description of this item, Gyoubu is consistently called Gyoubu the Demon, good to see it localized accordingly. Respectfully guarded, awesome, just like the original says. It is said that no prey can escape Gyoubu's horn is also pretty accurate. I'd say that in the translation of this item description, hardly anything was lost by the English localization. Great job. With Lady Butterfly yet again, we can see that her original name is a little different. She's called Maboroshi Yocho, where Maboroshi means illusion, phantom. You could assume that the localization couldn't come up with a good enough translation, but they totally did. In the Remnant description, they call her Phantom Lady Butterfly. Why isn't she called this when you fight her? I don't know, the whole concept of naming bosses 3 different ways in their items and in battle puzzles me greatly. The word lady is the translation of the honorific prefix o before her name. Great thing to see. These mentors employed strict methods. Is trying to adapt the original. Even though they were called teachers, they didn't go into much details, meaning that the people who trained Wolf were not teachers in a traditional sense, although they are referred to as teachers. The next line, translated very accurately, explains why. I thought it would be fitting to take a look at Snapseed, since the fight with Lady Butterfly is the first time you need to use it. The original name for this item is Tane Narashi, where Tane means seed, and the verb narasu denotes a wide assortment of sounds, including snapping. Surprisingly, this plant is real. In Japanese it's called Murasaki Keman, a type of fume word native to Japan, Korea, China, and Taiwan. It is an introduced species in the US. The seeds of the plant look exactly like the ones you see in the game. The plant catapults them with a snapping sound, hence snapseed. If an illusion occurs, it is because someone created it. Sounds kind of funny to me. The original is rather simple. Every illusion, without exception, has a creator. The next part is my absolute favorite, the part about defeating the creator of an illusion. The original uses the verb taosu, to defeat, to kill. You know what the first meaning of this verb is? To bring down, to throw down, to knock down from a high place. In the first phase, you fight the illusion of Lady Butterfly while she sits above on the statue and watches you. To dispel illusions, you need to knock down their master. The verb is pretty standard though, I'm most certainly fantasizing, but isn't it cool? The original name for the Phantom Kunai, as expected, is Maboroshi Kunai, since the boss is named Maboroshi Ocho, Phantom Lady Butterfly. Since childhood is quite a bold statement, urawakai koro is more like since she was young, which is not the same thing. The original says that Usui Forest is located to the north of Ashina, but is cut off from the land, meaning hard to reach. far from civilization phrase kinda tries to convey all of these facts at once. The localization also mentions Tozan Trail, but the original says nothing about it. Maybe this is a real-world geographical reference, but I couldn't find any provable connection. Now let's talk about Usui Forest. If you've completed Shura ending, you know that Owl's real name is Usuyu Konzaemon, and I'd say it's very likely that the mysterious forest belongs to his clan. Probably he and Lady Butterfly met there in their shinobi youth. The English localization makes a funny slip by saying his forest, obviously confused by the original Are no Mori. This kanji can indeed act as a third-person masculine pronoun kare, but it's also a kanji for are, a demonstrative pronoun that points at something that is distant both from the speaker and listener. Here, Usui Forest. This demonstrative pronoun is very rarely written in its kanji form. You usually see it in hiragana, so I don't blame anyone for panicking here for a hot second. It should be that forest. The forest is an exceptional, unparalleled place for training. The English localization chose the word ideal. Not bad. The localization ate up Genichiro's family name, so he's just Genichiro, both in the memory and in the remnant. Stop doing this, what the heck? By the way, the first kanji in his name, Gen, denotes bowstring. For some reason, the localization emphasized the fact that Genichiro learned the lightning of Tomoe to save Ashina, but if you remember the timeline, he actually learned it before anything even happened to Ashina, when Ashina was quite healthy and not dying. The original just states that Genichiro wielded a heretical art known as Tomoe's lightning, that's all. The localization also mentions heretical arts, in plural. The original, however, doesn't say anything about taking to heretical arts. There are no details given at all, apart from the statement that I mentioned earlier. The last sentence was broken up in two and kind of scattered across the description. In fact, the parts "with his country on the brink of defeat," such heresy may be the key to saving her, are in one sentence in the original. So the Japanese says, Ashina on the edge between life and death, or Ashina in the critical moment of its existence, and then continues, it's heresy that would protect her. Now it's time to remember that, apart from poor Tomoe and her lightning technique, there were other things in the lands of Ashina that could be considered heretical. Maybe this description is not talking about Tomoe's arts that do not seem to do any Ashina saving and instead just constitute Genichiro's personal and very cool arsenal. I think here it's more about experimenting on children, creating a false dragon's heritage, and making people immortal in weird ways. Genichiro was in cahoots with the Senpo monks, since he thought that all those things, quite heretical if you ask me, could save his country. It's not with the lightning he tried to save Ashina. In the last phase, his name changes, and we see Tomoe-ryu, where ryu can refer to a style, manner, or even a school of art or something like that. I like Way of Tomoe, it's accurate and sounds really cool. Ninjutsu, as we can read in the description of Bestowal Ninjutsu, are special techniques that Wolf discovers himself, being inspired after defeating a particular enemy. It's not something that the boss drops upon death, but rather an art Wolf learns on his own as the result of the battle. If Puppeteer and Bestowal Ninjutsu's descriptions allow us to see quite clearly how it so happened that Wolf learned these particular things after these particular bosses, it's not the case with Bloodsmoke Ninjutsu. It's hard to say what it was that inspired Wolf to create Bloodsmoke Ninjutsu. It doesn't really bear any characteristics that could potentially link it to Genichiro or to his boss fight. Maybe you have an idea or two about it, definitely let me know in the comments. Localization is on point, the original is Chikemuri no Jutsu, Bloodsmoke technique. All these arts are named Jutsu, and the description then defines them as Ninjutsu and Hijutsu, secret technique. The original goes into detail describing the mechanics of this ninjutsu. The blood droplets from someone you killed via backstab death blow turn into blood smoke that allows you to hide from your enemies. After that, you can freely continue your killing. English localization just explains the whole thing in broad strokes, but the main things are all there. The only thing that confuses me is the word smokescreen. Why is it here? They could have chosen blood smoke instead, like the original says, and it's literally the name of the ninjutsu. Source of strength is kate, that we already know as sustenance from the standard Remnant description. Undoubtedly, one of the coolest ways of storytelling in Sekiro is combat arts. Genichiro uses floating passage he learned from Lady Tomoe. The same combat art is used by Okami warriors in the Fountainhead Palace. Coincidence? I don't think so. There will be a separate post about Tomoe and Takeru, as well as another one about Okami and the Fountainhead Palace, so I won't dwell on it here for too long. The original name for the floating passage combat art is Ukifune Watari, where Ukifune is not only a floating boat, but also the title of the last chapter of the Tale of Genji, a classic work of Japanese literature written in the early 11th century. Ukifune is the name of one of the female characters in this novel. Her real name is unknown. I honestly read everything that I could about this novel, but could not see any viable parallels between Ukifune and Tomoe. The only thing they have in common is a suicide attempt that can be considered a failed one. Ukifune was saved in the novel, and Tomoe's death was in vain because she failed to save her master. Watari means crossing, passage, so this is translated accurately. Cross the floating passage is the exact translation of Ukifune wo Watari, and to be honest, I'm not sure what happened there. Did Tomoe cross something called floating passage with this combat art, and it allowed her to descend to Ashina from the palace? Is Ukifune a floating boat a place of some kind? I hope to find answers to these questions, or at least some additional information in future posts about Tomoe and the palace, so stay tuned for that. As of now, I can't really untangle this knot, if it can be untangled at all. English localization preserved the dramatic structure of the original text, where the name of the master who brought this combat art to Ashina is revealed in the last short sentence that leaves you electrified, yearning for more information. I appreciate it very much. Not only words contribute to the emotional effect of the text, but also structure, types of sentences, and their succession. It's often overlooked or dismissed, unfortunately, but here, well done, awesome work. Folding Screen Monkey's boss is an embodiment of a Japanese maxim: see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. This maxim is called Three Wise Monkeys. Why monkeys? It's actually a pun. Mizaru, not seeing, Kikazaru, not hearing, and Iwazaru, not speaking, have a grammatical form zaru that turns a verb into its negative form. Also, zaru is an alternative reading of saru, monkey. There is a fourth monkey, do no evil monkey, but it's often omitted. The monkeys cover their eyes, ears, and mouth, respectively. This maxim usually refers to those who cover up evil by feigning ignorance. If you remember what evil was occurring on the other side of Senpou Temple, you can see that these monkeys are here for a reason. There is an alternate version of this maxim, and it is far more important to us in the context of Sekiro. One monkey holds its hands close to its eyes to focus vision, the other one does the same with its ears, and the third one holds its hands to its mouth to speak louder. This version denotes the opposite: see, hear, and speak about things you stand for. Don't cover up evil, don't ignore it. And these are the monkeys we meet in Sekiro, souls of children who died in Senpou experiments and now protect the child of the rejuvenating waters. There's also one awesome detail that English localization didn't transfer into their version of the boss fight, and I don't think they could. The boss is called Folding Screen Monkeys, but in the original they're listed by names: Miruzaru, Kikuzaru, Iuzaru, the monkey who sees, the monkey who hears, and the monkey who speaks. After the last one, you see a comma, as if the list continues, but there are no more names. This little detail, along with the empty fourth part of the folding screen, is here to tell you that there is one more, invisible monkey. The fourth monkey is just called Miyazaru, invisible monkey. Together they are Gyoubu no Sarutachi, which corresponds to folding screen monkeys. The location you fight them in is called Genro, literally halls of illusion, so well done here. Important to note that the souls of the departed children cannot just possess any monkey, but find their refuge only in these monkeys depicted on the folding screen. So the folding screen with the monkeys was already there as an item, and then these monkeys became vessels for the fading souls of the children. Illusive Hall Bell is called Genro no Suzu, literally Bell of the Halls of Illusion, so that's accurate. Five-pronged is really important because, as you've already guessed, it's a real object. We briefly discussed it in the previous post about sugars and spirit falls. Its real name is Gokorei, five-pronged bell, and is one of the ritual objects along with Vajra, a five-pronged short club, used in Vajrayana, one of the Buddhist traditions. It is said that this bell can purge evil spirits from where the ritual is being performed. Very lore, because Illusive Hall is a place of tranquility. Not sure why the English localization says wolves. The original just says both monkeys and wolf, Okaimi here is used as a proper name, denoting, well, Sekiro himself. The original for Puppeteer Ninjutsu is Kairai no Jutsu. The translation is very accurate. The Japanese version is very poetic when describing the mechanics of this technique, and I'd say the English localization keeps up with it, which is really cool. With Puppeteer Ninjutsu, you can see how Wolf might have been inspired to master this technique after defeating folding screen monkeys. This art can help you bind a soul that should have been already gone from this world. This is the lore of the monkeys. Fading souls of children find their refuge in the monkeys, but sooner or later they will have to let go. The beauty of the original goes off the charts, and the localized version is honestly just as awesome. A puppet will move for its master for a short while. However, in the end its destiny is to disappear. A puppet moves on behalf of its master, but its strings are destined to snap. Beautiful. Great job with the text here. English localization surprised me greatly with its ability to convey the poetic qualities of the original text, the subtleties that some other localization just don't care about. The Russian one most certainly doesn't care. But at the same time it names bosses 3 different ways in their memories, remnants and boss fights and gets confused with the simplest things like the monkeys and wolf. There will be 2 more videos and posts about the bosses and their associated items up ahead, so stay tuned for those. Don't forget to check the description for relevant links and more reading. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.